If you're not sure how to visit Zion National Park and are looking for some tips for Zion National Park, then you're in the right place. Planning a trip to Zion can be tricky, so in today's episode, we're going to look at several tips for visiting Zion National Park that will make your life easier and your trip better. Hi, I'm James Ian, and I've written tons of guides and several detailed itineraries for Zion National Park. And I'm going to share my top 12 must-know Zion National Park tips with you. If you're watching this on YouTube, like and subscribe right now. If you're watching or listening to this somewhere else, follow my podcast to get the episodes as they come out. Zion National Park has two of the most iconic hikes in the country and some of the most incredible scenery. However, it's not very big and it can also get very busy. And those iconic hikes need some special preparation. By sharing these Zion tips and tricks with you, I'm going to help you have the best trip possible. Following these tips will help give you the peace of mind that you need, knowing that you're fully prepared and you know exactly what to do when planning your trip there. Be sure to stay to the end where I'll be sharing my number one tip. It's especially important if you'll be visiting in the busy season, so be sure to stay to the end for that. Let's get into it.
Welcome to National Parks Collecting with James Ian, the national park expert. He is here to help you have the best national parks trips ever. Get tips, discover hidden gems, and learn all you need to know. This is your path to collecting national parks experiences, memories, and maybe even a stamp or two.
So, what are my top tips when you're going to visit Zion National Park? Be sure to stay to the end where I'll be sharing my number one tip that everybody should know. But my first tip for visiting Zion is to check the water levels and the flash flood warnings before starting the Narrows. The Narrows is one of the most famous hikes in the park, possibly in the entire country. But doing the hike means that you're wading through the Virgin River. That's kind of the thing about the hike. It's in a really narrow slot canyon and the river goes through the canyon, so you actually hike in the river. It's amazing, but it does mean that the hike is very dependent on the whims of the river. So the National Park Service really closely monitors the water levels and the potential for flash flood risks so that everybody's safe, and they will close the hike if it's potentially dangerous. Typically, if the flow rate is above 150 cubic feet per second, or CFS, then they close it to visitors. This often happens in the spring due to the snowmelt or after heavy rains. So it's not uncommon for the Narrows to be closed for several days in April and May, although these closures can extend beyond just this period if there's been significant snowfall or prolonged rainy periods. For the most current conditions, check the National Park Service website or inquire at the Visitor Centre before you rent your gear if you're doing that and head out on the shuttle to the Narrows. Number 2, a tip for hiking in Zion National Park is to be aware of the toxic cyanobacteria in the Virgin River. The Virgin River is home to this toxic cyanobacteria. It's very common to have quite high levels there, and there's often warnings on the National Park website. And I've had several people over the years express some concern about this to me and ask about it. You don't need to freak out about it, but it's definitely helpful to be aware of it and to take some basic precautions. For example, don't drink the water or get it in your mouth. You should always carry sufficient drinking water and never rely on the Virgin River as a source. If you're hiking in the Narrows, be careful not to dunk your head underwater or splash water in your mouth, which is one of the reasons why having a walking stick to keep you steady so that you don't fall over and fall in the river is a really good idea. Also, if you have any cuts or sores or open wounds, you should avoid contact with the water so that the bacteria doesn't get into the open wounds. That can increase the risk of infection. So always cover any cuts with waterproof bandages as a precaution. And if you have been exposed to toxin-producing cyanobacteria and have any unexplained symptoms, you should obviously seek immediate medical attention and contact the Utah Poison Control Center by calling 1-800-222-1222. And of course, if you're experiencing a medical condition, call 911. So any advice I give here is always dependent on you accepting your own risk. And if you're not comfortable in any way with that higher level of bacteria in the water, then just don't go in the water at all. That's totally up to you. That's your decision, but it's a decision that you need to be comfortable with. What's another tip for Zion? Number 3. A tip for Zion if you're planning to hike Angel's Landing is to make sure that you get a permit. You can still do most of the hike without a permit, but if you want to do the last section, you need a permit. Angel's Landing is another of Zion's famous hikes. It's known for its stunning views, and the last half a mile is this really narrow path with really steep, thousands of feet tall drop-offs on both sides. So to manage the crowds and keep that as safe as possible, the National Park Service has a permit system in place. Permits are issued through a lottery system 4 times a year, but they also have another secondary lottery the day before, and I've got a permit the day before in the middle of August, so it's definitely possible, but of course not guaranteed. If you aren't able to get a permit, I wouldn't stress too much. You can do most of the hike up to Scout's Lookout without a permit. It's just that last half a mile section, which is the most famous section, of course, with the chain and the drop-offs that you need a permit for. I actually really love the hike to Scout's Lookout. I think it's really beautiful. It's really interesting. I'm actually not a huge fan of that last half a mile, so it's not the end of the world if you don't get it. So even if you don't get the permit, I still recommend doing the Angel's Landing hike, but just to Scout's Lookout. Number 4, another tip for Zion National Park is to make sure that you book a place to stay well in advance. It kind of goes without saying these days in the national parks, but I'm going to say it anyway. Accommodations in and around the park do fill up pretty quickly, especially during the peak season. There are a lot of options around Springdale, but even so, things do book out. So to avoid disappointment, reserve your hotel, campground, particularly if it's inside the park, or vacation rental well ahead, months ahead. The main gateway town, as I mentioned, is Springdale. It is just outside the park. So if you want to stay in the park and you can't because everything's full, then Springdale is still a great option. It's connected to the Shuttle. There's a shuttle that goes through the town that connects to the Shuttle inside the park. So it's very convenient, actually. Tip number 5, a tip for Zion National Park is to know the shuttle schedule for when you visit. For a lot of the year, most of the year, the only way to get through the main Zion Canyon is using the free shuttle service. The main part of the canyon is closed to regular traffic for most of the year. The shuttle buses run from early morning to late evening, but times can vary with the season. During the summer season, they start as early as 6 a.m. and they run until after nightfall. But knowing the shuttle schedule is essential, especially if you're planning to catch that first or the last bus of the day in order to maximize your time in the park. Otherwise, especially if you miss the last bus, it's a very long walk back. So check the National Park website or at the Visitor Centre for the most up-to-date shuttle timetable during your visit. Before we look at more tips for Zion National Park, if you're watching this on my @National Parks Collecting YouTube channel and you haven't already, please like and subscribe below. It really does help. So far we've looked at 5 tips for visiting Zion National Park. We're up to number 6. Another tip for visiting Zion National Park is to check trail conditions and closures before you visit. Zion has a very dynamic landscape, so trail conditions can change quite rapidly due to the weather, rockfalls, and other natural events. There have been several major trails that have been closed to rockfalls, some temporarily, some are still closed. There's several bridges over the Zion River that take you to trails that are sometimes closed. So before setting out, make sure that you check for any trail closures and the current conditions that may affect your plans to hike. This can be found on the National Park website or by checking at the Visitor Centre when you arrive. So I always recommend having a plan B and be prepared to be flexible just in case something's happened before you get to your planned hike. Number 7, something that I recommend when you visit is to spend some time under the enormous Cottonwood tree at the Zion Lodge. In front of the lodge, there's this large lawn, and in the middle of the lawn, there's this enormous tree that if you're there when the cottonwood is blooming and it's covered in cotton, or it all falls down and the lawn is covered in cotton and can get all over you. But it's very cool. It's really nice. It's just a perfect place for a picnic or just to kind of relax after a hike. The lodge is right there, so you can grab an ice cream or some lunch. You can watch for wildlife early in the morning or the late afternoon sometimes. So it's one of my favorite spots to just kind of relax and chill out, and I recommend it. Number 8, something that I always recommend is to visit other areas in the park. Most people just stick to Zion Canyon, which is the main part of the park and definitely by far the most visited. But there's actually other areas in the park that are really interesting to explore, and I recommend getting there if you can. One of them is the East Mesa, which is at the top of the East Rim. You'll pass through here if you drive to or from Bryce Canyon and see things like the Checkerboard Mesa, which is very cool. But there's other things. There's one of my favorite hikes in the park, hike to Observation Point, and it just offers a really different perspective. The landscape is really beautiful and different from down in the canyon. Another area is the Kolob Canyons area of the park. This is located in the northwest corner, and it has really beautiful crimson canyons and much quieter trails. It's really nice to visit, and very few people do. It's quite a long way to get there from the other entrances of the park, though. There's also the Kolob Terrace Road. This is a scenic byway that takes you through different landscapes, including woodland highlands, desert scrub. There's some farmlands even. You're going in and out of the park on the drive. And at the end, there's a really beautiful view from Lava Point Lookout. I've been there at the height of summer, and I've only seen a handful of cars. So if the crowds are getting to you, it's a really nice place to escape from the crowds, and it's very different from the main canyon. Number 9, Zion is just one of many national parks. If you're planning to visit several national parks or other federal properties like national forests in the year, I really recommend purchasing an America the Beautiful Pass. The America the Beautiful Pass can be a really cost-effective investment. It covers entrance fees to more than 2,000 federal recreation sites, including the national parks, so it can really save you money, and it covers everybody in a vehicle up to 4 people. Number 10, another tip for Zion, and this is true for all of the parks, so it's nothing revolutionary, but I do think it's good to take advantage of the ranger-led programs. Zion National Park actually has quite a variety of ranger-led programs that can really enhance your experience and enjoyment of the park. These include things like guided walks and talks and evening programs that kind of delve deeply into the park's geology and wildlife and history. So I really love doing them, and I recommend them, not just for Zion, but certainly for Zion. You can check the current schedule at the visitor center or online to see what's on offer during your visit and time some of your other activities around them. So far, we've looked at 10 tips for Zion National Park. We have 2 more to go, so stay to the end to hear my number 1 tip in just a moment. But first, my second last tip. And this is to get one of my itineraries. You'll have seen by now that there's just a lot that goes into planning a trip to Zion. There's loads to see and do. Many of those things require an additional level of planning. The park is very popular, so it can get really crowded, which means that timing is key. And with so much to see and do, things can be a little overwhelming to plan. In fact, the number 1 thing that people ask me about is how to put everything together into an actual itinerary. They worry that they'll miss something really cool, or that they'll be somewhere when everybody else is at the same place, or sometimes they're traveling with their family and stressing about how to keep everybody happy. So to help with exactly this, I've created super detailed itineraries. There are 1-day, 2-day, and 3-day itineraries for Zion that are tailored for different activity levels and interests. They're really designed to take the guesswork out of your trip and provide you with an hour-by-hour guidance, complete with tips, hiking descriptions, driving directions, maps, shuttle stop information, etc. And I've also included different options for different activity levels. So, for example, there might be an option for a long hike, and at exactly the same time, in a similar area of the park, there's another option that involves no or very little hiking. They're designed to be very flexible. Many people use them, and they're designed to be used exactly as is with that flexibility built in. But some people use all of that practical information and the timings and even then tweak it and create their own itineraries. So they're really useful in either case. Just follow the link in the notes below if you're interested to see more information. Now, as promised, what's my number 1 tip for Zion National Park? The thing that will have the most positive impact on your trip to Zion is to go early, to beat the heat in summer and the crowds and get a parking spot, either at the visitor center when the shuttle's running, or if you're visiting when the shuttle isn't running, at the small parking areas along the canyon. An early start in Zion isn't just a tip, I think it's an absolute necessity. Arriving at dawn or soon after allows you to enjoy the cooler temperatures. Summer is by far the most popular time to visit Zion, but temperatures are regularly well above 100 degrees in July and August, so it can be kind of unpleasant later in the day. And it's also you get there and the trails are less crowded. It's a nice time to be there. Parking is another reason to get there very early. During the summer, parking lots in Zion, especially the main lot at the visitor center, are typically completely full by 8 a.m. or sometimes even earlier. So arriving before that time greatly increases your chance of getting a spot. The sweet spot that I found is around 7 or 7:30 a.m. after the very first morning rush, when there can be really long lines to get on the shuttle, but before the late risers start to arrive at the park. Once the lots are full, you'll need to find parking in the town of Springdale, which is just outside the park. There are several parking lots there. And then there's a free town shuttle that runs through the town and connects at the visitor center with the main park shuttle. I read many people complain about the congestion in Zion in summer. I'm not saying it's not a thing, but I visited in August several times and have got a super early start and have never noticed crazy congestion. I'm getting back around mid-afternoon. Things are starting to clear out. I'll do another late afternoon hike. So if you don't make the early morning, arriving around 3:30 is also a good strategy to get a parking spot at the visitor center and beat the crowds. Sometimes I've done, for example, I'll hike to Observation Point in the morning and then drive down to the main visitor center and the parking lot there in mid-afternoon when things have started to clear out a little bit. If you want more help planning your trip, check the links in the description box below. There's a bunch of planning and booking resources there that can help you plan and book your trip. And keep watching my videos to get even more help so that you can have the best national parks vacation ever. And if you want to get notified about the next episode, just subscribe and click below.